Sorry that you were carrying that as a.
No, I appreciate you asking and all. Next time.
I figured, I wasn't gonna ask you. Yeah, good. Yeah.
I'm gonna get a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
That's it.
Oh, never had it.
Give my best. And he's here.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Didn't say it, didn't say no.
Did he?
Yeah, he's thinking it.
Oh, okay. Nice. Are we gonna hear that this morning? 100 is right. It's about being the only child and then slowly becoming one of the four. Yeah.
The PowerPoint is. there's-
Oh, that I emailed you?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
And are you able to get a mic for this?
Oh, all right.
Oh, yeah. Include attachments. Here we go.
Aha, there we go.
And do that. Jacob Johnson. Okay. Yeah, let me get a microphone.
The presenting of the topic on the iPhone. So
Gotcha.
you should get it.
Yeah, Martha just sent me one as well.
That's my baby.
Good.
You want some to eat?
Sure.
Blueberry muffin?
Not right now, though.
Oh.
Thank you, though.
Which is right now, far from. Beautiful.
What in the-
And the available. Because they have no staff there. I mean, they give you a code. And they give you a call. All the people around. In that area. And there's a whole bunch of them.
Nice to know that.
And it's beautiful. I mean, just nothing but the library. Have all that. Friday morning.
Okay.
Get started, everybody. Good morning.
Exactly.
If you cannot see the screen, if you wanna populate the front table, you're welcome to do that. Technology has not been my friend this morning. My own computer is currently sitting in my backpack, ready to throw out the window, so Martha was lending hers. So we're hoping to make some copies of this to our tables, but, thank you for coming to the budget forum. We're gonna be, as we're continuing to develop next year's budget, wanted to do check-in with you all, just to let you know sort of where we're at this year. And quite a few of the updates about sort of how things are developing.
Ask Martha already.
I'm Tom Anderson, he and his, I'm congregation treasurer.
She's getting a
And we're gonna
microphone.
Look at budget overview year to date through the end of September. We're going to look at some monthly operating information and compare that to some previous years. And then we're gonna walk through revenue and expense categories so that you get a reminder of what's included in each of those categories. Give you an update about where we're looking for this year's budget. And in many of the areas, we got sort of an outlook about how things are looking for next year. And then as there are changes for next year, whether the county staff or doing whatever, just giving updates. And then certainly welcome feedback. This is gonna be a process over the next number of weeks and months as we move towards approving this in finality. Both the council approves it and then this will be proposed at the end of the meeting on February. So first and foremost, I want to thank the esteemed members of the finance committee, most of whom have served as treasurer in the past. But it's a fantastic group. We meet at least monthly. And we have some fantastic conversations and we give very sage guidance. And so thanks to all of them. Special thanks to Nancy Nygaard Johnson, who serves as financial secretary, and the amount of time she puts in this area, plus all the others. Is stunning. I had no idea before I took this. Okay. So let's look at where we are with the budgets. And these are numbers through the end of September. So on the revenue side, our full budget for the full year to be about 588,000. Again, through the end of September, our budgeted amount that we would have taken in is 400, and we're at 409, so we're a little bit above the plan there. On the expense side, yearly, we should be having $585,000 of expenses. And again, through the end of September, should have spent 439. We've actually spent 425. So we're a net plus 23,000 again at the end of September. I will caveat that by saying there are some expenses that happen later in the year. The best example there is the reparations contributions that we make outside the congregation, and those are sitting in the mail slot to go out tomorrow. So that timing was perfect, and that's about $13,000. So again, we're doing well. We're on plan to have a balanced budget for the year, but again, that number is a little bit inflated just because again there are some things that are some bigger expenses that will still be happening in this year. Then I also wanted to give some context about monthly offerings and how we're doing this year as opposed to previous years. So you can see the growth of monthly offerings, again, through the end of September, since 2020. And you'll see that we are at a record amount over those years, so that's fantastic. You can see that for the previous 4 years, we were sort of bouncing back and forth in the same range, and there's been a pretty dramatic increase in this past year. That being said, want to caveat those totals. So the 2024 number is 12% higher than where we were at the baseline in 2020, but inflation has gone up 22%. So, our giving has been increasing by 2.8% over those years, so even though it's an increase, and even though that's good. And even though, a lot of congregations are not in that position where they're going to have that revenue growth. We're not keeping up with inflation, so just keep that in mind as we're continuing to look at some other numbers. Okay, I also want to go forward through, again, major revenue and expense categories. And again, talk about some of the pieces that go into each of those categories. Give some information about sort of where we're at this year. Sort of outlook for next year, if we have those numbers, and again, if there are things either that got changed this year. Or things that are on the horizon for next year. The other pieces that I want to caveat, some of you might be asking about the Lilly grant and how that might affect the congregational budget. We're gonna be keeping the Lilly grant separate, from the congregation. So, the one crossover that I think everyone should be aware of is some of the Lilly grants, is going to be used during the life of the Lilly grant to move Esther from a 0.8 position to a full position. But again, we're gonna be keeping that separate, and all the other Lilly expenses, again, we'll be keeping separate. Separate accounts, separate people working on quite a bit of it, so. And again, with the 3 congregations and needing to do quite a bit of documentation for the grants. I know that was advice we got from other places, and, Mr. Troutman, I think you're gonna be. Part of that. What? We're also trying to keep separate, a lot of the property planning and work. Again, we're still thinking about, you know, some, a loan from the foundation and some of the early preparatory work, but some of the bigger budget work about the property re-envisioning, you know, some of the rental units that we're hoping to do and ownership and changes to this building. Again, for now, we're gonna keep that, separate from the core congregation. Any questions about that at all? Okay. So, again, let's look at, on the revenue side, offerings. What's included in offerings, so pledges that people give, general offerings, for passing the plate on Sunday morning, any special gifts. Any special gifts that are given to the congregation, and then, Our Savior's Foundation does a grant, to the congregation each year. And so those are the 4 main revenue items.
They can.
Of the offering category. And again, you can see, and I talked about this earlier, but on a yearly basis, we are expecting $534,000. Through the end of September, we should have taken in 400. We've actually taken in 409,000. So again, above planning. On the rental side, so we have both rent from the Lutheran Volunteer Corps and Our Savior's Community Services. Again, on a yearly basis, should be taking in 50. The budget through the end of September would be taking in 37. We've actually taken in 42. So the big change for this year was that LBC
It
is
was.
still with us.
Oh, there we go.
So as some of you may remember, LBC has sadly shrunk pretty dramatically.
I think they might be
The
doing
number that I
something.
remember at peak, there were almost
At the-
150 volunteers. And I think 16 cities around the country. Currently, there are 2 houses. Winona House and one other house on the East Coast, either Baltimore or Washington. So I think we and Joel and previous treasurers have been very cautious about budgeting, continuing to have them continue to rent the house, and continuing to get that rent. They've had a little bit of a comeback, so they are still with us, and they are certainly aware of discussions that we're having about the property re-envisioning, and so we're keeping each other up to date, but they are here for this year. So we are, they are under contract or at least with us to be renting at least through summer of 2025. And again, that's still, you know, depending on where the property re-envisioning is by that point, I think we'll have to figure out, for next year, you know, does that continue? And then obviously with our Saviors Community Services, with the property re-envisioning, there'll likely be some changes there going forward, but we're on plan there. And then a special income category, so not a lot of money, but some youth fundraising, as people are giving money for the meals on Wednesday evening and interest that we earn in different bank accounts. Again, it's a few $1,000s a year, so we're on plan there. So again, we're doing well on the revenue side. I just want to make sure everyone realizes 91% of our congregational revenue comes from giving. So I think some people think sometimes, hey, we get a lot of rent from other places, or you know, that there are other drivers, but again, it's the vast majority of our money that comes into the congregation is coming from giving. So the rent, again, and special offerings are only 9%. So, and as I talked about earlier, offerings are certainly growing, but not keeping up with inflation. And as we'll see, as we start going into some of the expense areas, most areas are proposing increases that are well over the inflation rate for next year. So I think we're gonna have to do some thinking and stretching and prayerful contemplation about our own gifts for next year, as we're continuing to develop the budget. So any questions on sort of the revenue side of things? Okay. So let's move on to expenses. Staff, certainly a major driver there. We again, yearly should be spending $319,000 through the end of September, would have budgeted $239,000. We've actually spent $249,000, so a little bit over there. And again, in 2024, we did have a number of changes. So we did have Esther arrive, and we did also move to have some paid nursery staff for the first time in a number of years. And Mary announced her retirement and did retire this year. So 3 sort of major staffing changes. In 2025, again, as I mentioned earlier, with Lilly grant money, Esther will be moving to full-time. And I know the congregation did agree to walk with Esther and her household as they're moving through the immigration process. So there will be some of those expenses that we will have in the upcoming year and beyond. And there's continuing work on the new music director position. And then obviously we'll be looking for some staff salary increases, wanting to do some, you know, and from my perspective, some cost of living increases there. So we are within Senate guidelines on all the positions where Senate guidelines apply. So that's a good thing. I've always been shocked with some of my friends who are pastors other places about the number of congregations where people are below Senate guidelines and stay below Senate guidelines for a really long time, if not permanently. And that's been sort of shocking to me, and glad we're not in that position as a congregation.
Tal,
Yes.
did that include the music director when you say that?
I'm not sure if there's,
The guidelines are kind of odd, where it's like, called, then it says like lay people, and then, so it's those ones like that are very broad. So cause I just was looking at it, they're kind of hard to figure out like where, like a music director figures into which of those like categories. if they do.
Well, just because I wonder,
yeah,
I have zero idea what Mary was getting. I have zero idea what people get with that position. But I just assume that we need to be really in a, paying a good,
yeah.
a decent, whatever.
I'll try to do a little follow-up on that. That's a good question. Yes.
There was an association of Lutheran church musicians that advertised one.
Okay,
I was on a premium note for that.
That's probably what we maybe looked at, and obviously we haven't had to have a new person in 31 years, so it's probably changed a lot since then.
Well, that's why it makes me wonder, which I'm not saying that we did this.
yeah.
But what you are saying about people that are paid so little, when they've been in positions for a super long time, they don't always get paid as well, and then that new person coming in needs to be paid the going rate, or we won't get anybody.
And Mary's been different too, because she did the Bible study. I mean, so her
Yeah.
job over the years has evolved and is sort of fit to keep her in a position with benefits and all that. So I think we've done a pretty decent job keeping that up.
So
over
when
the
you
years.
say that, do you mean that doing the Bible study and so forth is, or is to help her to keep
Well,
her
no,
up to 20%?
well,
I mean, halftime, 0.5.
no, yeah, she wasn't even
that.
half time.
Oh, she
Well, no,
wasn't
she
even.
was. She was like 20.
I thought she
But,
was 0.5.
Yeah, over time, it definitely has evolved, and I think so. So
Oh, well,
to
that's a
keep her at a level with, yeah, with
We should
Other
move forward.
trainings,
Just as we,
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions there? Okay, operations includes a whole bunch of postage, phone, council charges, finance charges, whole bunch of stuff there. Again, on an annual basis, spending 29,000. Budgeted for the year as of, September of 22, and we're at 24 this year, so. This area is proposing a 16% increase, for next year. Certainly some internet credit card fees that get paid as people do donations via credit cards. Some technology upgrades, and I think it's, I think there's a correction here, it wasn't copiers and printers, but some audio and, computers that need to get some upgrades, so, so again, this is one area where there's an increase moving forward for next year.
I have a note, people that are giving and using their credit cards, if you have a Thrivent account, Thrivent will pay your credit card fee. If you go through Thrivent and give your money that way.
but I don't think you can do that to a church though.
I don't know, I haven't looked.
Yeah, I
On
don't
the
think you
list.
can. I'm
Okay.
just from my
Other giving then,
experience.
if you don't
I
wanna
don't
pay
think
that
you
fee,
can.
Thrivent will pay it.
And we actually have very few people who use credit card, because if someone does sign up with a credit card, I usually email them and just explain.
Lovingly guilt.
Well, yeah, just explain, just so you know, if when you use a credit card, this is what happens, and, you know, just so
You're
they're aware.
giving
And
us
they,
this much.
I mean, some people have changed and some people haven't, but, you know, we're usually pretty, but we actually pay a percentage of our entire giving through online giving as a fee. So that's part, because we've had more and more people switch to it, then that gets higher because it's a percentage.
What is that saying? Comparing credit card,
Less.
well, is it 1% to 3% of it? Yeah,
I do know. Let me think. Should I
I don't think it's precisely, I just wondered if it was.
I probably have it on my phone actually.
Like, when you give
It's like
them in,
point some percent, it's not very much.
it's less than 1% is what you're saying.
Yeah, I'll go look just to be sure. But the other thing that happens with credit card is that, if somebody gives $100 donation using your credit card, we credit them for $100. And we are offsetting that with the amount of the fees, which is usually between 2 point something and 3 point something percent, depending on your credit. We cover that, so that's part of those.
I know a lot of other places.
Alternative, if you get directed from your bank.
Yes.
I know a lot of other places to David's point, are really encouraging, or frankly, charging people or giving people discounts
So that's what
to move towards
they want.
using either bank accounts or, for some places, debit cards, charge less than credit cards, and so doing some of those things, because again, in an individual situation, it may not look like a lot, but in the aggregate, and especially since, so many people are moving towards online giving, it does really add up over time, so. Okay, MCFF, includes a whole bunch of godly play, community meals, church camp. I think, the request in this area is, I think, a 9.8% increase. Was that right?
I just know the areas that.
Yeah. Do you wanna?
We just decided, one of the biggest areas is there's like a $500 camp scholarship. And with so many youth coming up, we made it, I think we might have made it 2,000 this year. But we just anticipate that that might go up as we support our youth going to different camps and that was always big. One of the ones that went down was, with Living Questions, we were able to use Wednesday Connections for the meal instead of a separate meal for Living Questions, and it actually helped build community. So that actually brought the fund for the meals for Living Questions down, because we're gonna use, Wednesday Connections. Those are the two I remember.
Sounds right.
But yeah, it was an increase overall.
Okay, property, self-explanatory, so water, trash, sewer, maintenance. Again, annual, we're, for the year, you know, the yearly budget's 94. The budget, we're well under budget this year, actually. But we are proposing a definite increase for next year. And I think, Nancy, this is one where it was some updates to get, but.
You want me to?
Sure.
So we have added organics, pickup from Aspen, so we're not using city one that really isn't ours. So that is an additional $30 a month, so that's part of the change. We also, there was not a 10% in custodial services, but they did increase ours last year before we budgeted. So then ours ended up being over budget, and then they've been charging us some extra for the guy playroom and the nursery room, because that wasn't part of the original goal when we had them. And then the 15,000 for the property reserves, I think we've done this in the past, that, we have potentially some major air conditioning and heating issues coming out because our equipment is getting old. So one of the air conditioners is at least 20 years old or more. And one of them did die this past year, and that was like, it was a lot. It was 15,000 more to replace that. So we wanted to put in the budget some money that could go to property reserve because we pulled stuff out to pay for the air conditioning. Or in the end, it may end up having to go toward replacing some equipment. So we're working with Owens to get, I mean, they can't tell us when they're gonna die, but they can at least give us some estimate on, you know, you're gonna probably need to replace this with this. So that's what we're trying to do. There's a reason why that's the whole goal this year in 2024 is that we had very little snow earlier in the year. So the amount we paid to our snow removal was way less than what we were before. That is probably the biggest thing that caused that to be low or lower than normal. And we just have not, we haven't had as many things. We haven't spent as much money yet. Well, no. There have been a number of things that we just haven't had to spend money. Now, we've got a couple things just recently that are gonna end up on that. So it should get a little higher, but that's why we didn't want to bring it down, because we have a lot of snow, and if we have some issues, then we're gonna need it. We've also budgeted $3,600 to do some work in the parking area right out back to restripe and to fill in cracks and holes and to put some asphalt down. So that's part of the budget for next year.
I don't expect a response to this, but I have a hope that property repairs are somehow integrating with property revisioning, which could include, you know, $200,000 of HVAC redo. So just to the extent we can be as efficient as possible in that coordination. And I know there's unforeseen there.
Right, and that's why, like, some things we may not do, because if it could be something that's part of a capital campaign, if it's not absolutely necessary, then we're sort of holding off on it.
Mike, just to that point, we have a small working group kind of dreaming about the future of the church, property proper. And we have already connected with the property team to begin to say, we're gonna need to sort out what's gonna be in the capital campaign and what's just regular maintenance. So, you know, a new roof, a new HVAC or whatever, if we're gonna have a second floor, then those expenses might wind up in a capital campaign, whereas if we're continuing with this building proper, they may be in that budget. So those conversations have already started.
Excellent.
Some of these, concerns have already been expressed, but when we're talking about property, we're talking about every single day of the week, of the year, property is an issue. Whether it's security, lights, whether it's, trespassers. I've had to put out fires, out here in the backyard. I've had to put out fires and move furniture out of the way so people don't sleep and live here. I mean, that's a big conversation we have to have, is what is gonna happen and what are we gonna do and how do we wanna be in the community? And we don't really necessarily want people sleeping and living and doing drugs and starting fires out here in our backyard, making needles for me to pick up almost on a daily basis. But that's some of the property that we have to think about and look at how we're living in this community. It's a very, vibrant, thriving neighborhood, but it's got a lot of concerns. And the camera issues with security, we have to think about that as well. In the coming proposals, it's about $1,000 per camera to hardwire them into the system. If you look throughout the first floor here, there's 6 or 8 cameras already here that have not worked in 25 years. And we're living in a camera age where we need cameras. We're beyond that. And I keep talking about this and bringing it up. And it's just as a daily reminder that how are we gonna see what might have happened back then, what might have happened here? How are we gonna see who may have made contact, where those vehicles came from, where they went, you know, I mean, it's not about persecuting people or prosecuting. It's about documenting what's actually happening here so we can speak truthfully.
Okay, sorry, so moving on to outreach, so what's included, Isaiah, food ministries, climate justice, any field trips that we do. Again, yearly budget, 8,000, as of the end of September, we had budgeted 6,000, we've spent 5,000. Senate expenses, so again, this is our, contribution to the Senate. Just as a reminder, we, do 10% of pledged offerings to the Senate, and we are up to date there in our pledge. And then reparations and strategic initiatives. So the annual budget, 16,000. The budgeted amount through the end of September is 12. As I mentioned earlier, those reparations checks are about to go out, so actual year to date, it's only the 1,000, but checks are in the mail, literally and figuratively. So, and I know that the reparations team's looking for an increase. This is one of the areas where, they had proposed a stronger increase for this year, that as we were trying to get the budgets, into balance, that got cut back somewhat, so, you know, we're looking for possibilities of getting that back up. Was it 18?
Someplace between 15 and 18.
Yeah, yeah. So getting back up to the 15 to 18 range for next year. So, on the expense side, you know, we're on the cusp of some really exciting things happening next year. So we've got some fantastic opportunities for furthering both social justice and affordable housing in the neighborhood and beyond. And some opportunities to re-envision this building and what we need it to do for the congregation and others, to make it a better fit going forward. But as you've seen in some of the numbers that we've walked through thus far, on a lot of the expense side, the preliminary numbers have expenses growing well over the inflation rate. So it is something that, as you're thinking about what you're going to be offering for next year, just please keep that in mind. We will be working over the next number of months, we're reviewing and refining the budget. Certainly working more with the finance committee and tables and taking this to the church council. And again, the annual meeting is coming up on February 9th. So what's next for you? if you are one of the households that has not made a pledge, I would ask you to do so. Just like I always think about when it's Minnesota Public Radio, pledge weeks, and they ask you to become a sustaining member. It's sort of that same theory where, I think some people think, well, I'll just give when I can. And that's great if that's sort of where you're at, but if you're in a position to do a pledge, that obviously helps the congregation, the finance committee, council, etc., sort of plan for the money that you're intending to give and make some appropriate decisions about where those dollars are gonna get spent in the confines of the annual budget. Otherwise, again, there's certainly nice dollars to have, but it's just harder to plan for that and make some good decisions. So, for pledging households, I'd ask you to prayerfully consider your 2025 pledge and think about your own situations. And I would ask you to go back and look at, Martha's letter that got sent out recently. I think that the data that shows sort of where households are in different, weekly giving buckets, I think is always really, I think that's really useful information where you can see where other households are at, and just trying to think about your own household budgets and where you might be able to do some increases. And, some people are trying to move along the line and moving, if you're tithing already, fantastic. If you're not, some households are looking at, doing some increases, moving towards tithing. Some people look at, again, that sheet that got sent out and trying to think about, are they able to move up another category? Obviously, all the households in this congregation are very different financial places, so there is not a one size fits all way to do this, and I don't want to say I'm asking for everybody to do a whatever X% increase, because again, that really wouldn't be accurate for where different households are at. So obviously not going to do that, but yeah, there we go.
If you haven't seen it, here's the letter and a little insert. I've got one.
But, just be thinking about sort of where your household is at and where you might be for next year. So, and again, we will be, making those pledges, starting, a week from today and collecting those, and that is gonna help inform, crunch some numbers further as we start getting the revenue and expenses, in line for finalizing the budget as this is gonna move forward, so. Yes, questions or comments?
First of all, thanks, Don, for your leadership. So there's gonna be a lot of receiving and spending of money relating to the property and the visioning. Does that go through your, or is there another person that, can handle
Okay,
that?
we're keeping those accounts again separate. I mean, there might be some money from the congregation that does some of the early seed money for some of the property stuff. It all depends on sort of who we choose as especially on the rental project, who we choose as a partner moving forward, I think will greatly affect how much money we might have to front sort of as a congregation in partnership with OSCS. Some of the development partners, once you make an agreement with them, they're pretty well financed themselves and sort of step in and start paying for a lot of those expenses right away. Some others they're very different agreements that happen, so we're just not at a place yet where we know exactly how that's gonna happen.
I want to affirm what you just said, and then just on particular details for this year, 2024. At the beginning of the year, Our Savior's congregation, I guess it was church council, made a decision to commit 41,000 from a prior year. That wasn't in the numbers that you showed. And Our Savior's Services also pledged some funds, so that there were funds pledged by both organizations that covered 2024 pre-development costs. And I think everything you've talked about for 2025 does not include any dollars related to redevelopment. That will be a separate accounting and set of expenditures. I think maybe others can correct me, but I think
Nope,
that's,
that was right. And the extra was because of COVID.
okay.
Like the extra money that we had that we
That had
contributed
from
was
COVID,
because, right?
The COVID blessing.
Yeah, kind of, essentially.
Surplus from 2023
Okay.
that we pulled into 2024 for pre-development. So we've been pulling out of there any of these expenses.
There's a comment, maybe more than affected it. It strikes me, I like this, that the budget you walked us through, 2025, has been developed with an abundance perspective. And before I came to our Saviors, I was in a number of churches that were hardcore into a scarcity perspective. Like, every increase of a dollar was meagerly apportioned out. And I like faithfulness of thinking we can go, increases above inflation here and there. Let, walk through the reasons why that's a good thing and invite us to prayerfully consider how we can make that happen.
We might be back with some updates in December, but I remember. And I mean, there will be a crunch time when we're sort of, figuring out how this all aligns together, but and it is especially complicated and exciting at the same time with again, with the Lilly grant and that expansion of programming and the property pieces and everything, there's a lot of stuff. And a while back, to me, it felt on the horizon, but on the distant horizon, and it feels pretty close now, which is exciting. But just trying to figure out how all of this integrates to do that. Yes, go ahead.
Another kind, having been on that joint property committee for the last year and seeing the people in that working up close. As a congregation, we are really lucky that we have Tal as our treasurer, who knows what he knows, as a housing finance guy, not to mention as a congregation finance guy. And we should all say a great prayer and give a lot of love to Pastor Martin. She's really putting herself forward to move our property reimagining and our campus redevelopment. She puts in a lot of time, it's inspired talent that she's bringing to the work. And I didn't appreciate it until I got a little closer to watching.
She's putting in. I mean, and just try to figure out again the pieces of it and with sort of the two phases of it too, where again, there is the potential of an ownership piece and a rental fee. I mean, it's well, again, both exciting and complicated.
Well, Pastor Martha is not here and she cannot speak for herself, so we get to say things for her. And I will share my thanks with David, because as much as work as she's putting into the financing, she's also putting that kind of focus on the reparations lens. That's how this project is coming together. And that's what I think makes this a church project and not just like a development project. So I'm really proud of the work that we're doing, and I think we all can be really proud of the work that we're doing, and Martha's being a great leader. Somebody tell her that we said this.
Everybody.
Yeah, everybody's
Have
you had a chance yet? It looked like some people have already submitted sort of a wish list or a dream projection for 2025. Have you had a chance to roll that up? And if you put all the wishes in place, are we looking at 10% or a 15%?
I hesitated to do that yet,
Okay.
just because salaries is such a main driver of the percentage on the expense side. I thought about doing that, and then I thought it's gonna give some false. But when salaries are the main driver and all the other things, important as they are and whatever, but I thought it would give either too much or too little comfort,
Fair.
so.
When we have that, that would be good to share,
Yeah.
because I think it is good. I just know like how the benefits that we pay to our staff, that is going up, especially the health coverage is going up, so we know basically because of salary increases and then what that means to the benefits that we forego. I mean, it's definitely going up.
I know, in our
our homeowners insurance and our building insurance is going up substantially.
Yeah,
Well, you know, ours renews in March, so we have to kind of estimate that a little bit. It actually really didn't go up all that much this past year. But, you know, but we did have the roof work and stuff, so I'm not sure how that will impact. We are supposed to, we asked to like get together with them earlier. So we're not deciding, oh, it's due in March and we have to decide, do we need any changes? So that, I think we need to do that sooner than later and check in with them to make sure what kind of coverage and what are we looking at. But it wasn't too bad.
if you want a copy, again, technical issues up until about 9:11 this morning, so. If you want a copy of this, just come on up after and give me your email address. And I'm happy to email a copy out to you. I wanna do a little deeper dive, but, again, you'll be hearing more about this, and again, members of tables will be continuing to talk. Finance committee will be continuing to work, council will be voting on this. Probably a preliminary and a final at some point, like we did last year, so. This will be a continuing process, but, towards a fantastic over next year, so. Thanks for coming, and, talk more, thanks so much.
Thank you.
The percentage for Banco is 0.45% that we pay for more money.
That's right.
1/2 of 1%.
All right.